Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is Game 5 from the 2011 Women's World Chess Championship match. Hou Yifan with the white pieces once again is looking to extend her 2.5 to 1.5 lead over Humpy Koneru. So let's have a look. We have e4 and e5, and in fact the first 11 moves of this Game 5 are identical to what was played in Game 4. And so that's not atypical to see in match play either, but eventually it will come to a point where one side or the other will deviate, and in this game it's white that ends up deviating. In Game 4 we saw knight to b3 and it ran something like this where the queens came off, and then we had bishop to e3. The rook came over, eventually gobbled up that c2 pawn, but at the end of the day there wasn't really enough to show well, white wasn't able to win, or in other words, black was able to hold that one to a draw. And at this high level of play, that's pretty much regarded as a success with the black pieces if you're able to hold to a draw. So after d4, instead of knight to b3, we're having this c takes on d, knight takes d, exchange a handful of times, and now knight f3 offers a queen exchange, and we once again have a situation where the queens come off, and it's not really too much of an imbalance. I guess there is this thing going on where, 4-on-3, a 3-on-2 majority on this side, but beyond that, I'm not really seeing too many other imbalances showing themselves. If there is one liability on the black side, maybe it's this c7 pawn. Maybe the rook could come over here, put pressure on it. It really doesn't show itself in this particular game, but just some rough thoughts from this position, clearly regarding the pawn structure, and also, again, this c7 pawn kind of catches my eye. So black castles, knight d4, looking for what I thought was another imbalance, knight for bishop exchange, or in other words, picking up that bishop pair. Also, another thing that you could reason is that it's getting out of the way so this f pawn can now advance. And when I talk about advancing the majorities, the pawn majorities, when it comes to a situation like this on the king side where it's a 4-on-3, when you advance the majorities, it's not necessarily the H and G pawn that are going to be pushed forward, because that would really subject the king to maybe some problems. Definitely if the queens are still on the board, or in fact in almost all cases it would really be a really bad thing to be pushing your H and G pawns. But I believe it will usually be a good thing if you could get your F pawn involved, in conjunction with that E pawn. That could really stir up some problems if you get F5 in. And again, if we had the queens on the board and a lot more stuff going on, we could have F6, and before you know it, that king could already be subjected to some attack. An F pawn getting to that F6 square in particular could really turn out to be a great thorn in the black position. It really doesn't come about in that way in this game. We don't really have the one side and the other pushing their majorities forward, but instead, so it's certainly something to think about. But from this point on, we have now knight to d4, rook f to d8, very logical. That's the only open file. b4 kicks this knight away, and I thought that move was played so that white can now go ahead and grab that bishop and obtain the bishop pair without allowing black to recapture like this. Because if that did happen, I believe we could have, well, first black could throw in the in-between move, grab that rook, then recapture, and you'll note that this pawn is now already in a position to just advance, and a 3-2 majority is able to create a passed pawn much quicker than a 4-3 majority. And I just don't see how that would really benefit black, or excuse me, I don't know how that would benefit white by going in for this knight takes on e6. So the adjustment, or what was played, is b4, first kicking this knight away, knight a4, and now we have knight to c6. So again, I kind of questioned, okay, well, I thought you kicked the knight away so that you could grab that bishop. So what's maybe the downside? Why is white not running with knight takes bishop? So let's have a closer look. We could have, after knight takes on e, first recapture, force this bishop to retreat. So now it has to essentially develop again. after f takes e, we have a case now where we could be seeing something like c5 eventually, and this will no longer be, well, I don't see it as any target, of course, if it's able to get on c5 and exchange itself off for the b4 pawn. But additionally, I don't think that white likes the fact that these two bishops are still on the back rank, and well, that in addition to this move a3, it seems as though white's going to be needing to expend a move just to watch over that b4 pawn because of the pressure black has on it. So these are maybe reasons for why, in other words, white did not run with knight takes bishop and obtaining this bishop pair that's often talked about in chess. So instead, we have knight c6, and this is going to turn out to be a pretty safe home for that knight, and it's very disruptive to the black side. They're not really going to be able to pivot on that d8 square anymore with the rooks, pressure on the bishop, of course. And so black responds with exchanging the rooks, forcing white to underdevelop. Bishop takes, and now bishop to f8 reacting to that knight's threat. Bishop f3 getting on the main diagonal, looking for tricks against that rook. Rook to e8, a3. You don't want to really keep any of your pieces tied down to the defense of one of your pawns, so a3 to watch over that. Also, it's going to free up the rook to move eventually because the bishop was also placing pressure on that a2 pawn. Knight b6, a repositioning time right here, looking for that c4 square where it would pile up on maybe that a3 point. g3 is, I guess, a flight square, but I don't know that that's really necessary at this point. You could reason it's for a flight square for the king and also to allow the bishop to tuck back to g2 as was played in the game. At this point, h6 is saying I want to gain some space with g5, and white is saying no, I don't want you to be gaining any space with g5 because if that pawn is allowed to get to g5, that maybe could be a bit annoying to the white side. If white maybe didn't take that into consideration and played instead bishop to b2, well, for one thing, knight c4 could maybe be a bit annoying to this bishop. But additionally, g5, and now the thought of g4 and a black pawn kind of clamping down on this f3 and h3 squares, or on those f3 and h3 squares, is essentially saying that these pawns are now disconnected, and this f pawn isn't going to be around to help out this guy on e5. So just preventing that altogether. I don't think that there's any rush. Again, black is looking to gain space, and white does not want black to get that g5 move in. So from here, g6, this is going to be the focal point for black, looking for that bishop g7 move, pile up on this guy. Bishop backs up, which allows the f pawn to advance. Bishop g7, here we go, f4, once again an instance of allowing your own pawns to watch over your pawns. This is the second time that we're seeing this situation going on. So more fuels being added with f6. Bishop b2 watches over it. We have the exchange on e5, and now this knight to c4 move. And I believe that is the way to go from here. You don't really want to allow this knight to be an essential post, putting pressure on this pawn and allowing an eventual rook movement to that c1 square, which would target c7 directly. So just focus on your own piece placement. In other words, get your own pieces more active right here. Don't help the positioning of your opponent's pieces. The knight transferring from c6 to e5. In other words, let's get your own knight from b6 to c4 and force the issue right here, putting pressure on the bishop and that pawn. So bishop takes, king takes. The king is a bit more central, and now it's time to get the last piece involved on the white side, and that is this rook. And it doesn't even have to move in order to get active. a4 essentially removes the target. This knight was putting pressure on the pawn for as long as it was on a3, and by engaging with that b pawn, we're now going to have an open a file, or actually in this case a half open a file with this a pawn now a potential target. That's really not going to turn out to be enough, because after bishop to g4 we do have pieces here that are pretty close to this white king, and a rook that is really close to being well, it already is very active, and it's looking to eventually function laterally. Pivoting on e2 could really start to be problematic for white, and it's something that white needs to take into consideration at this very point. In the game, we saw rook to a2, allowing again for this lateral defense, that second rank defense. I believe if rook takes a, we would have something very similar to what was played in the game, where the rook kind of functions on both the second and first rank, and there's not really going to be a good solution for white at that point. If the rook gives check like this, we could just kind of have this situation going on where, you know, the white king is pretty much forced to going back and forth, well, pretty much along these dark squares, because otherwise that's just going to be that's dead for white, right? Knight to e3, and then the bishop's gone, and soon after that white king. So it would kind of be something like this, where the king goes back. But, you know, even in this situation, something like rook to e2, and again with these threats right here, it's kind of forcing that king still to come back to that g1 square. But this does not happen. White tries something different first, recognizing, okay, needing some second rank defense, let's do that, and maybe only a little bit later I'll be able to get that a6 pawn. And so from here, rook activity. It's not enough to just have your rooks on open files anymore. It's after that you want to get it doing something laterally. So black is now successful in doing just that. Pressure on g3, and white responds with king to f2, getting it more central, watching over that g3 square. The rook stays active, still keeping a close eye on maybe making use of this second rank should this white rook go elsewhere. Additionally, this knight is getting ready to move, and then there'd be that discovered attack on the knight. Knight e5 at this point, and I believe just looking to simplify it, and after the knights come off, it's a bit more safe for that white king. But as it finishes up at this point, we have the knights come off. This is a pass pawn, but it's not really going to turn out to be a big deal at all. The rook plays to c4, getting ready to get the b pawn. That's exactly what we have. Rook takes a now, rook takes b, rook c6, getting ready to grab this pawn, and black just sees a way that they can stay active with their rooks, just giving check, forcing the king to that h2 square, because otherwise what is there? There is no going to e3. You have to keep a close eye on the bishop. Going to f1, it's a similar story. The rook just keeps going to that b1 and b2 squares to put pressure on the king. So what we had, rook c6, rook b2, king g1, rook b1 check, king h2, and the rook just comes back to b2. There's no need to really watch over this pawn right here, because black has already calculated that the threats that the rook and bishop can be placing on this white king are going to be enough to hold a draw in this game 5. And it finishes up in the following way. Rook takes on c, king to g8, and we have a case of king to g1 being played, because otherwise, what is there? This right here is the threat. Just it's already pinned, and black is now getting ready to just win it with bishop to f3. So we had the rook, it kept giving check like this. The alternative is at this point, after king g8, instead of king to g1, the only other try, I guess, would be to do something like rook to c3 to watch over that f3 square. But at this point, we just have rook to e2, and now it's still functioning laterally, and now getting ready to win that pawn, which is just going to be a dead equal position. So as it turns out in this particular game, after king g8, we just have the white king going back and forth on those g1 and h2 squares, the black rook giving check, and also threatening that bishop f3 move in each instance for whenever that rook plays to the b2 square. And at this point right here, after move 43, white and well, the game ends in a draw, and we have this match now at 3 points to 2, and with 5 games remaining, we have Humpy Koneru. She still has 3 more games with the white pieces, so we will see how things play out from here. So that's all for this video. As always, I hope you got something out of it. Take care. Bye.